Hi, I'm home now from my book tour for the Snowy Nap. I visited 23 cities in 18 days, and many signings were snowy. Some signings even had a live hedgehog brought by my book friends. I couldn't visit all those stores if it wasn't for our tour bus and two great drivers, Frank and Mark. I give presentations and book signings in the day, and Mark and Frank drive us all night to the next appearance. My presentation this morning is at Hood River, Oregon, at the Columbia Arts Center, sponsored by the Wacoma Bookstore. It was a pleasure to see bookstore owners Muir and Jenny and show the audience how to draw a hedgehog, and greet many friends that I've met at past book signings. Thanks for watching. A good way to start a book. Now, how did this book start? Well, I was at our nature center in our little town of Norwell, Massachusetts, south of Boston, and they had this whole exhibit on hibernation. And I've always been fascinated by the fact that some of the animals that food supply is not so plentiful in wintertime kind of curl up in their burrows and dens, and their heartbeat gets slower, they don't breathe as fast, and they kind of have a long sleep throughout winter until spring. I've noticed in Norwell, a lot of our little chipmunks have already gone to sleep for the winter. And then we're out in our cabin in the Berkshires, the bears have all gone to sleep already. So they had the exhibit was like a cutaway, so it showed the ground, and then it had their little burrows, like that would have a tunnel down there, and then a little place below the frost line where they would curl up, tail usually over the nose, and they would be there for the winter. Well, hedgehogs hibernate. Hedgehogs also do not live in the U.S. They live in Europe, Scandinavia, and Asia and Africa. We call them old world animals, as opposed to new world animals that live in North America and South America. And I've always loved them ever since I read about Mrs. Tiggywinkle in Beatrix Potter's book about Mrs. Tiggywinkle, the washerwoman hedgehog. When she washed her clothes, she would put them on her prickles to dry off, like a clothesline. Then I read in Alice in Wonderland about Alice joining the croquet game, where the croquet mallets were flamingos upside down held by their legs, and the croquet balls were hedgehogs, because hedgehogs, when they're alarmed, want to protect themselves, they roll up in a little round ball. Only in the croquet game, once they were, pushed through the wickets, then they would walk away, which did make for a very satisfying game when the croquet balls would walk away. So here's the first simple shape, and when I get a little ways, then I'll turn for everybody that's in the corners. But this easel is a little bit wobbly, so I'm going to have to cross my fingers when I do it. So the first shape that's going to go on the page it'll be like a cereal bowl, kind of a deep-sided cereal bowl, and that's going to be the china basket. Did I show you the picture? This is the picture it's going to be. It's Hedgie in his china basket looking out at the winter scenes and enjoying it from Lisa's warm winter farmhouse. So that's the bowl. And then an artist is always correcting. Don't be too hard on yourself when your drawing isn't perfect first time around, because that's part of being an artist, is constantly thinking, what can I do to make it better? So here's the bowl. Next comes a shape almost like a grapefruit, as if it's sitting in this bowl. And I'm overhanging it a little bit, and that's going to be Hedgie's head. And then a smaller rounded shape, about like an orange peeking over the top, that will be Hedgie's tummy. And then I'll have his feet hanging, his paws hanging over the edge. And I haven't got an idea for what those look like. They look kind of like flying wings right there. And then this is the most important part, is going to be forming his face. Pointing up towards that corner it almost looks like an ice cream cone shape, a small one. Or you could say it looks like a piece of candy corn. And then I'm going to make that be the tip of a heart, and then the top of the heart will be facing downwards and show the pattern of the fur that goes on Hedgie's, the soft fur of his face, compared to then the more bristly ruff he has. So this is time to turn it so you can just see those shapes, and then I'll work a little bit more on some of Hedgie's features. So there's just the simple shapes to start with. And then next comes some important tidbits. I thought when I'm out on the book tour, I would tell you some of my, not really secrets, but techniques and tidbits about drawing that you can use with your drawing. So here is his nose right at the end of the ice cream cone shape, black, and it's pretty shiny, so I left a little sparkle light there. And then his prickles come down the edge of that grapefruit shape. And then here's the little pattern around his face. He's looking, it's a profile. And so then next comes that bristly fur that kind of protects him, because he'll be wandering around at night through fields and through little areas of brush, and that fur will protect his face. And there's his little paws crossed on his tummy as he's sitting there, propped up, looking at wintertime. And then his ear is a little crescent moon shape. And if you ever see a hedgehog in real life, or some of you may have a hedgehog, the ears look like a little piece of little gray velvet. They're very soft. Hedgehogs are nocturnal, and they have quite large eyes because they need to see at night. So here's his eye, and now that I'm in front, I can do a little adjustments, because it always is hard to draw from the side. Sometimes you get a little bit of a distortion. So there's his prickles. I'm just going to add those in to make him have the right proportions. And now I would be doing this normally with a pencil, and then I would erase the parts that I don't like, but you wouldn't be able to see the pencil from back there. That's why I'm using this marker. So here's the round eye, and then mammals and reptiles, they have like a little ring around their eye that is the difference between where the eye stops and then the fur begins. And then in order to make him look sleepy, I'm going to make his eyelid kind of come down about a third of the way, because when you get sleepy, sometimes your eyes start getting drowsy. And then I'll take his eye, the pupil of his eye, which is black, and I'll make that kind of rolled up as if it's rolling up like this. And I don't know if you know about the anatomy of an eye, but we have the pupil, which is the black part, and then we have the iris, which is the blue, brown, hazel, green, all of those beautiful colors of eyes. Hedgie has kind of a bay eye, and that's the part around. But when you do here's the third helpful hint for you. When you do the pupil, leave a little white spot in it, because you can see from me or your neighbor or any of the books that are around the bookstore and they have a picture of a person, you can see a little sparkle in their eye. It's just the reflection of light. If you put that in your drawing will look more alive and realistic. So that's what Hedgie's got. And I want him to look, well, he's happy because he's looking out the window, but he's also a little bit worried, so I'm going to make a line like this. So this would be a worried face. See how my eyebrows kind of have a little rise towards the center of my nose and maybe a little crease in my skin there? I'm going to do that with Hedgie, because he's thinking about, boy, every day I'm getting sleepier and sleepier. What's going to happen next? But he's still happy. He's looking out at the landscape. And then he's very sleepy, so if you ever notice that someone's very sleepy, they might have like a little circle under their eye. And I have an artistic license, so I'm going to put an eyebrow on Hedgie, because hedgehogs do not have eyebrows. And it's going to make him look, I hope it's going to make him look a little bit more appealing, because I am not above making my characters appealing. I want him to look I want everyone to look at Hedgie and say, they won't say, oh, there's an old hedgehog, he's just really sleepy. They're going to say, oh, look at Hedgie, he really wants to have everything work out well. He wants to see winter, but also he wants to be able to have his snowy nap too. So then I'm going to do a little additional work on his basket that he's in, because when I went to Denmark, I went to lots of museums and open-air folk museums to kind of see what the kind of furniture and china and pictures on the wall that you would see in the olden days in Denmark, because for some reason when I think about the olden days and go to these museums, it makes my imagination start to expand. So maybe that will be the same for you. So I think it's time for him to be colored in. And this won't take but a second. I'm going to start with my light gray. These are called Prismacolor markers, and the best part about them is they've got a thick end and a thin end, and they're see-through, so you can put one color on top of another. I'm going to start with this lightest of grays, and I'm going to show you about shading, and I think it's time for everybody over there to see how it's going so far, and over there to see how it's going so far. And then next comes the colored part. And get these legs back where they should be. So what I'm going to do, I've got the thick end of the Prismacolor marker, and I'm just going to go down the edges of this china basket that he's in, and it will start looking, instead of flat, more a little bit like it's rounded, kind of a 3D type of situation there, which is what I'm after. Because I love cartoons, and that would be like just plain lines, but with Hedgie, I want him to look like he's, you know, a real character, kind of in between a made-up character and a real character. I mostly want him to be able to help tell my story. So there's his little gray ear. And then if you like to draw with pencils, that's my favorite tool. You can sharpen your pencil and then use the side of the pencil to do your shading. So there's the first color of gray. This is the lightest one. Next comes this little darker one. And these sets of Prismacolor, you can get them at any art store, or Hobby Lobby, or Michael's, or Blick Art Supplies has them. And I'll make his legs a little bit grayer, but getting back to the shading, because I want you to see this little transformation that takes place, where it starts looking more rounded. And then he'll cast a shadow, so I'll put a little gray underneath him so he doesn't look like he's floating up there. And there's a little bit of gray coming here, and these little holes in his little area that he's in. And then I can do a little bit more shading around his modeling, around his face, and his little ruff, and his gray paws come next. And his ear, I can do a little shading showing where it's curved around there. I can kind of go over it with my darker gray. And do you see how it gets a little bit more realistic looking? You can do that exact same technique. Then I've got even the most dark gray of all for the area in between his prickles, and I'll go in the same direction as his prickles, and that's just a way of, just in the coloring in process, I can make it work to tell my story. So I'm going in the same direction as prickles all the way around. There's a little place there that needs to be done. Maybe cast a shadow under his ear, and maybe a little bit around his eye, and some fine little whiskers. I could use the very thin end of the marker to do that even more effectively, probably. And then also his feet. Now the foot that's furthest away there, I'll make dark gray, and it'll make it look like it's further away. And then where he is sitting in the china basket, I'll make that a little bit darker gray. It kind of sinks him down. And then a little bit on the edge of his container that he's in. Hedgie's in a container. Okay, and maybe a little bit gray up here. So here I'm making some more of those little adjustments. I don't want anyone to be getting mad because their picture doesn't come out perfectly the first time, because part of being an artist is always making these little adjustments and changes to make your picture just the way you want to, because you're the boss. And now here's a color called Cinnamon Toast. I don't know if I told you there's like 144 colors on these markers. And then if you don't want to get the whole set, you can go and pick out ones that you like magenta or teal or some of your favorite colors. So one of my favorite colors is Cinnamon Toast. I love this color. It's also, there's one called Mouse Brown that is similar. So here's his tummy. That's going to be the brown fur. And then down his legs a little bit. And then here's another way to do shading if you don't want to do it with gray. You can just take a darker color of this is Cinnamon Toast, and I don't know what this one is. It's probably sienna or, what is it called? But anyway, it's a little bit darker, but the same shade. And I'll use that to maybe do a little bit on his muzzle, and where his fur meets his ruff, and that contributes to his kind of brindled appearance. So there, Hedgie's starting to get looking like a real hedgehog, but he still has a personality. He's a little bit, he does think and talk to other animals, so we know it's not like a nonfiction book. Now I've got my pink, and I'm going to make pink cheeks and pink ears on him so that he'll have kind of a appealing look. So I'm using my artistic license again because hedgehogs do not really have pink cheeks and pink ears. I got that idea from our bunny. He has pink ears. Okay, here we go. And then last of all, I'm just going to make a few decorations on that china basket. I've got 2 shades of blue because when I looked at some of the antiques at this museum that we went to in Denmark, I often go to the country my book is set in. And so far I've been to China, Russia, Costa Rica, Martinique. One of the most interesting places I went was the high Arctic in Canada. And also India is a new one for me last couple years ago. And then my next book after that is going to be set in Alaska. So I'm going to go to Alaska to the muskox farm there because my next character will be a tiger and the one after that will be muskox. Okay, so he is just about done. An artist should always sign their work. So there's my name, and then I'm putting December 2018. And you're probably asking yourself, why does Jan Brett need to put the date on her picture? Well, the reason why is because being an artist or being able to draw and color is really an innate human skill. We all are pretty good at doing that. And if you choose to be an artist, you practice all the time. And every time you practice, you get a little better at your art. So even though I'm a big lady with all those books, I always in my heart of hearts think, oh, maybe this book will be a little bit better than the last one, and maybe this drawing will be a little bit better, so I put the date on it, and you could do the same thing. Last of all, this is about your creativity, now that my drawing is finished. If you look at your finger or your thumb, you can see that there's little lines there, and that is your fingerprint. And no one in the world has a fingerprint just like yours. You are the only one. And that is the same way when you draw a picture or you write a story. So for example, if you're an artist, one person might have certain skills and gifts that are very special. They might be good at putting colors together, or they might be good at designs, or another person might be good at making big machines or buildings. And all those gifts and talents, you might have a little bit of this one, a little bit of that one, and you have your own special recipe, just like your fingerprint. Now add to that, that's your gifts, is your experiences. Now maybe you're a tree climber, and when you climb trees that you know that the bark is all different on every tree. Sometimes it's got furrows in it, sometimes it's white like a birch or green, but you're not one of these ones who sits down and puts a tree and makes a black trunk with your black crayon because you know better. You've been up in a tree and observed it. So all those experiences are going to help you with your drawing. And last of all, you have your likes and dislikes. And that is really the fun of being an artist. I love hedgehogs, so I like to put hedgehogs in my books. And some of the other animals that I really find fascinating, I can also use as characters. And you can do the same. So my challenge to you is in the next couple of weeks or days that you spend some time just drawing. Get out your art supplies, your paper, maybe think about what you're going to draw ahead of time, and then tell your family you want to have a little time by yourself so that you're not interrupted, so that you can really think about what you're drawing. And that's when the magic happens. Sometimes I'll put on a kitchen timer for an hour, and I'll just say, I'm just going to spend an hour in my picture, and I'll add a little bit here, I'll draw my hedgehog, and I'll add the whiskers, and I'll maybe imagine what Hedgie's thinking, and then all of a sudden the world around me becomes less important and almost disappears. But then my picture world gets more and more elaborate, and I keep adding things, and finally I feel like I can walk into the page. And that's what keeps illustrating fresh and alive for me, and I hope that you will experience the same thing with your own drawings, and you will have a beautiful creative picture that you've done yourself. Thank you very much. Thanks for being such a good audience.